What can smaller firms do to ensure appropriate access to their products?
Well, I think the best thing that any manufacturer can do, whether they're large or small, is really to do their homework. When I talk about homework, it's homework having to do with coverage and payment methodologies and really understanding how a payer might perceive their product and think through the value messaging that a manufacturer might want to give a payer to make a compelling story for coverage and adequate payment. And a way to do that is really to look at the value message for the product and ensure that there are endpoints in the phase 3 clinical trial that serve those payer needs. And as we see trends like comparative effectiveness, or we see new molecules come out that might have to do with personalized medicine, at the end of the day, those endpoints that are important to payers are going to be critical. And if those endpoints can be gotten during the phase 3 clinical trial, that will serve up coverage and payment later, as well as serving those populations that may be underserved.
In what ways might health reform proposals help or hinder access to care?
Well, I think health reform is really very exciting because it doesn't matter which side of the bench you sit on. Really, the outcome of health reform is to make sure that people have access to health care. Now, a concern is, well, if we made all of the uninsured people insured, that's a good story because that's more access to treatments that people need. But if people who are insured can't afford their benefit, then they're underinsured, and that means they can't afford their copay and they may not be able to afford their deductible. So manufacturers are going to need to continue to keep a very sharp eye on that patient population to make sure that they're not lost. So suddenly a patient population that they knew very well in their patient assistance programs, the uninsured, becomes insured through health reform, but perhaps they're underinsured because they can't access their benefit. So that's a very important segment to keep an eye on as health reform comes to light in whatever form it eventually comes out in.
Where do trends like comparative effectiveness and personalized medicine fit into our discussion around patient assistance program design and implementation?
Well, I think those endpoints really come down to doing the homework and having manufacturers do studies to really understand what endpoints payers are going to be looking for. Because when you have things like comparative effectiveness and very complicated products like a personalized medicine type molecule or treatment, payers are going to want to know more information about their product so that they can make adequate coverage and payment decisions. Comparative effectiveness really looks at clinical data. So a manufacturer could have any kind of great program, but at the end of the day, if they don't have the clinical data to really support their use, so that the payer understands the value message of the product and the outcome for the patient, then a program is a program. And really, the data is the thing that rules at the end of the day. So an investment in clinical data and understanding messages that are important to payers will be critical.
How is technology adoption in the healthcare environment, for example, EHRs, e-prescribing, web portals, affecting patient access? And where is there room for improvement in this area?
Well, I think everything electronic is very exciting because from a physician office perspective and from a pharmacy perspective, those environments have really existed on the fax machine. So it's very exciting to see a movement towards electronic technology because I think it brings greater transparency to payers, to physicians, and to patients. So having things move to a more transparent environment where physicians can really understand where patients have sought treatment and what treatments they're on, I think we're going to see improvement in quality and in outcomes. So those things are very, very important. However, from the doctor's office perspective, there's going to be an investment that's needed, an investment in technology, an investment in education, and really a change in workflow. And so those are considerations to really think about as we move forward into a more electronic environment. But I think it's exciting.
With the healthcare environment in the midst of such a potential change, are there any best practices you can share as it relates to patient and copay assistance program design?
Yeah, for copay programs, there are certainly a variety of models that are out there. I think a model that really helps from a pharmacy benefit perspective as well as a medical benefit perspective is sort of the best of both worlds. And so there are claims-based programs that build off the technology and the work processes that pharmacies have and that physician offices have. And this means that when a patient goes in for treatment, from a pharmacy perspective, they just continue to file a pharmacy claim. From a physician perspective, it's just like billing a secondary or tertiary payer. And from the patient's perspective, they don't have to do anything. So it's a streamlined process that helps on both sides of the fence, whether it's a pharmacy benefit or a medical benefit. It's a process that both of those environments really understand, and it's easy for the patient. So I think programs that are streamlined, that really build off existing technologies, are cost effective, and they're the ones that are going to be used the most frequently.
What metrics can pharmaceutical manufacturers put in place to measure the effectiveness of their patient and copay assistance programs?
Well, I think the most important endpoint to look at is whether or not patients are dropping off of therapy. So if a patient has enrolled in either one of those programs, you would hope for a product that needs consistent dosing, that the patient is coming back for the repeated prescribed doses. And if they're falling out, that means something's wrong with the program. And going back to reassess whether there are barriers, whether it's too complicated, those are important things to look for in order to really metric whether your program's working correctly.
Thank you, Nancy, for sharing your perspective on these issues.
Thanks, Gina.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back soon with another all-new webisode. Until then, if it's on your mind, it's in the know.